The Spanish Inquisition, an era where priests claimed to cleanse souls, but somehow ended up poking their noses, and sometimes much worse, into bedrooms. Forget the bonfires of heresy. Half the confessions they extracted could have doubled as the dirtiest fan fiction of the century. But before we dive into this fiery scandal, do me a favor, smash that subscribe button like a heretic's door at midnight, and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and at what ungodly hour? Midnight, breakfast, or somewhere in between? Spain, 1478. While the rest of Europe was busy perfecting oil painting and inventing new dance steps, Spain decided to invent something truly terrifying: the Inquisition. Officially, it was supposed to keep the faith pure. Unofficially, let's just say it made medieval Tinder look polite. Ferdinand and Isabella gave it the royal seal of approval. Publicly, it was all about rooting out heresy. Privately, it became a theater of shame, where sexuality was policed with the enthusiasm of today's TikTok comment sections. Here's the shocking bit. They weren't just after blasphemers. They went after bedroom behavior. Priests became peeping toms with holy authority. People were dragged in for the most absurd charges, kissing too passionately, enjoying sex too often, or, brace yourself, trying out positions not listed in the church-approved manual. Yes, there was basically a medieval PDF for missionary only. One 1490s report describes a young woman accused of unchaste imagination because she admitted under torture that she sometimes thought of her neighbor while saying her prayers. Today, that would earn her a bad rom-com, not a trial by fire. But the Inquisition, they treated her like she was plotting to overthrow heaven itself. And then there were the tests. Oh, the tests. Allegedly, holy men devised methods to check if women were virgins, often involving humiliating, invasive examinations, all in the name of purity, of course, which is a little like a corrupt cop searching your house for stolen goods, but somehow pocketing your jewelry while he's at it. Pamphlets from the time, yes, medieval gossip rags existed, mocked this obsession. One satire claimed the Inquisition cared less about souls and more about whether Spaniards were praying with their pants on. And the people knew it. Behind closed doors, they whispered that confessionals were just voyageur booths for the clergy. And the irony? The louder the church screamed about sin, the more people got curious. If you tell society this is forbidden, society tends to reply, say less. By 1500, Spain was buzzing with underground stories of forbidden liaisons, each whispered with both fear and excitement. Because nothing makes a scandal juicier than when it's illegal, deadly, and stamped with divine authority. The Spanish Inquisition promised to save souls, but more often it just embarrassed bodies. And honestly, the line between sermon and gossip column was thinner than a monk's robe. Confessionals. On paper, a holy place for cleansing the soul. In practice, they were medieval gossip booths with better soundproofing. Priests sat like moral auditors, demanding every sinful detail. And trust me, they didn't want the short version. If Netflix existed back then, they would have called it True Confessions, Spain Edition. Take the case of Isabel de la Cruz, dragged before inquisitors in Toledo, early 1500s. Her crime? During confession, she admitted to having impure dreams. Now, before you imagine something wild, the poor woman confessed to dreaming about holding hands with a neighbor's son. The Inquisition, of course, treated this like she'd staged an orgy at Sunday Mass. Isabel was shamed, fined, and nearly exiled, all for something that today wouldn't even make it into a PG-13 movie. And yet, the priests took special interest in these lurid details. They wanted names, gestures, settings, basically medieval fan fiction. It was as if the church was producing its own smut anthology under the cover of divine judgment. Satirists of the age saw straight through it. A 1520s pamphlet mocked the inquisitors as hunters of kisses. saying they chased lovers with more energy than they chased heretics. Imagine a court scribe rolling his eyes as he writes, "Accused, guilty of enjoying her husband's touch too much." Spain apparently was the birthplace of both flamenco and sex shaming. And the irony? The more people were hauled up, the juicier the rumors got. Streets buzzed with gossip like a 16th century Twitter feed. Did you hear? Maria confessed she touched herself? No. And with a candle lit? Scandalous. Pamphlets spread these half-whispered secrets further, sometimes exaggerating them until they sounded like erotic novels disguised as warnings. Now let's talk about priests themselves. Because if you thought they were squeaky clean, think again. Behind monastery walls, rumors swirled of brotherly love taken too literally. Secret trysts between monks and nuns became a favorite subject of underground satire. One ballad joked that the cloister was less about vows of chastity and more about finding creative ways to break them. The biggest hypocrisy? Many inquisitors themselves were later accused of excessive familiarity with parishioners. Translation: the same men punishing villagers for their lust were sneaking into bedrooms after dark. People whispered about it in markets, in taverns, even in church pews. But no one dared to say it too loudly, unless of course they wanted a free ticket to the torture chamber. It was a society where desire was treated like dynamite, dangerous, forbidden, but impossible to hide. And whenever the Inquisition stomped it down, it only flared back stronger, like pressing on a campfire with your boot. One traveler from Italy even wrote, in amused horror, "The Spaniards confess more in a week than we Italians do in a year, for they must reveal even the warmth of their bed sheets." In other words, Spain had turned bedroom business into state business. The Inquisition didn't just control Spain's faith, it micromanaged its fantasies. And in doing so, it created a black market of gossip juicier than any royal scandal. If you think the Inquisition was all about fiery sermons and dusty parchments, no, my friend. It was part holy tribunal, part sadistic theater. Imagine the worst reality TV show ever, where contestants were strapped to wrecks instead of winning roses. Let's start with the infamous purity tests. Inquisitors obsessed over female chastity like Silicon Valley bros obsess over crypto. A woman accused of heresy? Suddenly, her virginity, or lack thereof, became Exhibit A. Midwives, often forced under oath, were ordered to inspect women's bodies to check if they had been corrupted, which is just a polite 16th century way of saying legalized sexual violation stamped with a holy seal. One notorious case in Zaragoza records a girl named Beatrice accused of witchcraft simply because she had knowledge of herbs. During her trial, inquisitors demanded proof of her virginity as evidence of her innocence. When she resisted, they declared her guilty. In other words, the test wasn't about truth, it was about humiliation. Then there were the torture chambers, the Inquisition's favorite playground. And don't be fooled, torture wasn't just about breaking bones, it was about sexual humiliation disguised as interrogation. The strappado, where victims were hoisted by their wrists tied behind their backs, left bodies dangling, joints popping. For women, the position often left breasts exposed, which was exactly the point. Chroniclers note guards who lingered in their duties while women hung half-naked in front of an audience. Torture as entertainment, with a side of voyeurism. Or consider the rack. Victims stretched until tendons snapped. But in some cases, inquisitors paused midway, demanding confessions of lustful behavior, as if someone screaming in agony was in any state to recite their sex life. Yet records show questions asked mid-torture were often about carnal sins, not theology. Pamphleteers mocked this hypocrisy in coded verse. By faith they tie, by rope they test. In virtue's name, they bear the breast. Dark humor for a dark time. Even water torture, a precursor to modern waterboarding, had a twisted edge. Victims were stripped, mouths forced open, water poured until their stomachs swelled. Inquisition scribes claimed it was to cleanse the soul. Translation: state-sanctioned fetish for control. And here's the kicker. Many inquisitors were accused, sometimes quietly, sometimes loudly, of taking bribes to lessen sentences. Want to avoid another round of the rack? Well, maybe your sister could visit the tribunal chamber after hours. A grotesque barter system where sexual exploitation was baked into the institution.
Outside the walls, gossip spread like wildfire. Tavern songs joked that inquisitors were celibate by daylight but devils by candlelight. Housewives whispered about guards who bragged of their conquests in the very cells meant for sinners. The cruelty wasn't just physical, it was performative. Trials were public spectacles designed to terrify crowds. Victims dragged out, half naked, their bodies marked with torture. The message was clear: sin with your body, and your body will be punished. Ironically, the punishment itself became a grotesque display of the very lusts they condemned. Foreign travelers were appalled but fascinated. One French observer in the 1600s Spain wrote, "The Spaniards condemn fornication in speech, yet celebrate it in torment." A line so sharp it could have been a meme had memes existed. The Inquisition called it purifying the soul, but really, it was voyeurism with better branding and a captive audience who couldn't look away. So far, we've seen torture chambers turned into peep shows. But if you thought the kink ended at the dungeon door, oh no. The real scandals often unfolded in velvet-draped chambers of bishops, inquisitors, and even monarchs. Because apparently, the higher your hat, the dirtier your secrets. Let's start with the clergy. Inquisitors swore vows of chastity, but rumor mills worked overtime. Monks who thundered against lust by day were sneaking into convents at night. Whole satirical ballads circulated about friars who fasted from bread but feasted on brides. In Seville, one pamphlet accused a senior inquisitor of fathering 3 children with a nun, cheekily titled "The Fruits of Fasting." Imagine TikTok, but on parchment. Even convents weren't safe havens. Some were literal hotbeds of scandal. Secret tunnels connected monasteries and nunneries. Netflix couldn't write this stuff better. Reports survive of spiritual unions where confessions turned into caresses. A 1620 case details an abbess accused of instructing novices in holy embraces, which sounds less like theology and more like HBO. And then there were the royals. The Spanish crown backed the Inquisition, but the monarchs themselves were knee-deep in affairs. King Philip II, the so-called most Catholic king, was notorious for mistresses. Court gossip whispered that while subjects were burned for adultery, His Majesty collected lovers like trading cards. Hypocrisy so rich it deserved its own royal seal. Nobles, too, played the game. Aristocrats accused of heresy sometimes escaped by trading secrets or bodies. A duchess under suspicion might suddenly find her case dismissed after hosting an inquisitor for private prayer sessions. Spoiler, there was no praying. And the satire kept rolling. Plays staged secretly in taverns mocked inquisitors as bumbling hypocrites, wagging fingers by day, wagging other things by night. One joke described the tribunal as God's court above and Cupid's court below. Foreign ambassadors lapped it up. Letters home described Spain as a land where priests denounced debauchery on Sunday and indulged on Monday. An Italian envoy in Madrid quipped, "The Inquisition burns sinners at dawn and dines with them by dusk." Brutal, sarcastic, and probably true. And what about the pamphlets? The memes of their day. Drawings circulated of inquisitors with oversized codpieces, captioned "The True Instruments of Confession." Markets sold them under the counter, and while possession could land you in prison, demand was always sky high. People laughed, but quietly, because satire could be as dangerous as sin.
What's truly wild is how the Inquisition thrived on this hypocrisy. The more fear they spread, the more scandals they hid. A priest caught with a mistress? Easy fix. Accuse her of witchcraft and poof, problem solved. Convenient, no? They called themselves guardians of purity, but behind closed doors, it was less holy scripture and more badly written erotica. Except no one was laughing unless you were drunk in a tavern with the latest pamphlet. By the late 1700s, the Spanish Inquisition had burned through more sinners than firewood in a cold winter. But here's the twist. It wasn't heresy that killed the beast. It was gossip, scandal, and sheer exhaustion with its hypocrisy. The Enlightenment had rolled in like that one sober friend at a wild party asking, "Wait, why are we torturing people for fun again?" Pamphlets from France mocked Spain as a kingdom where priests feared more bedsheets than books. Brutal, and everyone knew it was true. Inside Spain, whispers became open defiance. Aristocrats joked in salons that inquisitors spent more time in brothels than in churches. Coffee houses, the TikTok of their day, buzzed with satire. Caricatures showed inquisitors chasing skirts while ignoring libraries. One popular sketch, an inquisitor reading scripture upside down while eyeing a tavern maid. The caption, "He seeks, but not the truth." Even the clergy couldn't keep a straight face anymore. Younger priests, inspired by Enlightenment thinkers, began side-eyeing their seniors' late-night confessions. Letters survive where they called the Inquisition a holy farce with unholy appetites. Basically, subtweeting, but with quills. Then came the public trials. Oh, the delicious irony. A bishop caught maintaining not one, but 3 mistresses. An inquisitor exposed for secretly writing erotic poetry. Their enemies published the verses in underground pamphlets, and let's just say it was not Shakespeare. Imagine the holiest man in town rhyming grace with lace corset and doing it badly. By the 1800s, Spain had bigger problems. Napoleon stormed in, revolutions raged, and suddenly nobody cared about policing bedrooms. People had real fires to put out. The Inquisition looked ridiculous, like that one uncle still ranting about VHS tapes in the age of Netflix. Outdated, unwanted, and endlessly mocked. Finally, in 1834, Queen Isabella II pulled the plug. No more tribunals, no more torture chambers. The most holy office went out not with a bang, but with a groan. The records were packed away, and Spain tried very hard to pretend none of this ever happened. But the jokes lingered. Travelers in the 19th century still wrote about Spain as a land of priests and pleasures, neither holy nor pure. The Inquisition left behind ashes, fear, and enough scandalous anecdotes to fuel gossip for centuries. And here's the kicker. The very institution that claimed to be Spain's moral compass ended up remembered as its dirtiest secret. The watchdog of sin? More like the dog that kept sneaking into the neighbor's yard. They swore to guard faith and virtue, but in the end, the Spanish Inquisition was undone not by heresy, but by its own unholy lusts. Turns out the devil they hunted was often staring back at them in the mirror.